Okay, so moving on to section 7.2. And how do you actually post to the ledger? So that's the topic of this section, and it is the fourth step in the accounting cycle, posting to the ledger. So it starts off, I like this by saying the journal is like your diary of everything that happened. So all the transactions that happen. And the problem is we can't see how it affects each account. So by posting to the ledger, we can actually then know what's going on in each account. So the purpose of posting is to show the impact of the business transactions on each of the different accounts. And so the journal is thought to be the book of original entry, and the ledger is sometimes called the book of final entry. The size of the business, number of transactions, really decide how often you're going to post. So if you're a Target, you're posting every probably minute versus a little small mom and pop sole proprietorship might post once a day or once a week even, depending on how many transactions they have. We're always going to go left to right when we post. And here is kind of the first example of that. I'm going to try and make that a little bit bigger so that it's a little bit easier to see. So we start off with this general journal transaction of the first transaction, right? Where we put money into the bank and we start a new company. So we debit cash or in credit capital. Okay, so all of this up here we've kind of done with the exception of these two numbers right here. So we're going to go left to right, and we're going to post the debit entry, and then we're going to go left to right, and we're going to post the credit entry. Okay, so the first thing we do, we have these two ledger accounts. Obviously, this was being a big book, so they wouldn't be right together. But cash is here, and the account number, and capital, and the account number, and these would already have been opened. So we're going to take the date, and we're going to bring it down here. Now, if you don't post on the same date as the entry, you don't write the current date. You write the date of the transaction. So let's say it's October 3rd today. We wouldn't write the 3rd. We'd write the 1st because that's when the transaction happened. So we put the date here. The description is usually left blank because we don't need to describe the transaction. Here's the description right here. So there's only a couple things that are put here. One we know is balance, but this isn't a balance. This is a transaction. Then there's another one coming up later for a correcting entry. So we're going to leave the description blank. We're going to say, where did we get this from? We got this from the general journal, G, page 1. So we write G1 here. And that's because I told you there are many different types of journals. And so there's a sales journal, a purchases journal, a cash payments journal, cash receipts journal. All those have different numberings. So we're only going to use the general journal. We take the debit amount and we put it here as a debit. And then we compute a new balance. So 25,000 plus 0 is 25,000. And obviously we're going to do formulas. And then the final step, the sixth step, is to take this 101 and transfer it back up here. And that's like putting a check mark here saying we've done it. So you never want to do these ahead of time, like if the phone rings or you get distracted by a customer or something like that. You always want to do this as the last step so that you know that you've actually put it there. And then you would repeat the process down here. So capital, we would say the date. We come down here with the date. We say it's from general journal page 1. It's a credit right here that we're taking. So we bring this down and then we compute a balance here. And so 0 plus 25,000 is 25,000. The last step is we take this 301 and we transfer it back up here. So kind of a tedious process there, but really one that you just, if you do them the 6 steps in order, you'll be good to go. I don't know if there's anything more I want to say here. Some businesses use the description to write the source document. You can, but it's not required, and you can always go back to it and find the source document right there. So the source document is really not transferred into the ledger. Okay, so important thing here. This is common. Posting minimizes error. So if you go from left to right, if you do it in the right order, It'll really help you out. And since it's kind of busy work, sometimes people just take the posting reference number and they write them all down. Well, then you don't know if you've posted it. So I really want to stress that you shouldn't do that. That should be your last step. Never write an account number in the posting reference column until after you posted it. Okay. And so then when you're done, this is kind of what it looks like. So your general journal from before is we're going to have all of this filled in eventually with our posting references. That's kind of what it looks like when it's done. I like to sometimes come in here and put an X here for the memorandum number, just so I know that I have a full sheet. It's all filled in. Let's see, what else do we have here? Importance of posting. Like we said, posting summarizes so that we know what we have in each account. When we're done, our little ledgers are going to look like this. And cash is going to be very full. Notice that it's always a debit balance. And then some of these other accounts are going to not really have much in them, but they're all going to look the same. Okay, so how do we compute a balance? Really important that you know how to do this part. When we're looking at these balances up here, if we have a debit and it's a debit balance account, we add. If we have a credit and it's a debit balance, we subtract. So if they're like, you add. If they're different, you subtract. Let's see if we can find our capital account here. Our capital account, just 2 credits, so not anything different here. Accounts payable is normally a credit, and if we had a debit, we subtract. So when the existing balance is a debit, we're going to add when it's a debit, we're going to subtract when it's a credit, and vice versa. When the account balance is a credit, we're going to subtract when it's debit and add when it's credit. So they're likes, credit, credit, add, debit, debit, add. And here they have an example of cash in bank where we're subtracting these 2 amounts because they're credits. The other thing is we never want to show a zero balance. They like to put a line through it. It's okay in Excel if we have it as a zero balance. I'm just going to let that go. Here's another little part where I want to show you something, what not to do. So here's an example of a cash ledger account in Excel. And cash, we know, has a debit balance. So here's where we're putting 5,000. We have a debit of 6,000. So I'm going to take that and add that together. Credit, since it's a debit balance, we're going to subtract, and so forth. Here's what some people do, which is wrong. Like, we should never have a credit balance in cash. So they're just simply transferring these numbers over and not computing anything. So we want to make sure that we don't do that. So that's going to take us a couple problems trying to get into the hang of that, but we should be good to go. So section 2.